Hello and welcome back to the next prompt for Neopagan November. If the frame looks a little crooked, it's because I have my phone propped on a couch ottoman type of thing. So it's not you, it's me. So the next prompt is heritage, and I had to wrestle with this a little bit just because I actually have a lot to say in terms of what can cross between heritage and cultural influences. And that is another prompt that I will be doing in the future. So I didn't want to say the same things twice. And I have so much to say that it could be a fairly long video. So I went onto Google real quick and looked up the definition of heritage. But the first thing that came up was more about things that you inherit. It seemed more materialistic. And then I went on to, I think it's the University of Massachusetts website, and they actually gave like a small little article, I guess. It's like an introduction because I guess they do courses on heritage. So the website says heritage is the full range of our inherited traditions, monuments, objects, and culture. So I think that I'm going to leave the culture part out of it as much as I can and save that for when that prompt comes up. So inherited traditions. I think I want to talk about my 23andMe because I saw some people talk about that, and I think that it is relevant, and it's also going to kind of set a base for the cultural prompt later on. So I am a daughter of parents who at one point were undocumented in the United States. They migrated from Mexico. They came from a very small town. And I almost don't even want to call it a town because it was so rural. It was, it didn't have like a hospital. They didn't have like an official doctor. They did have a school, but everybody in that small town could only go to that one school. So that's how small it was. And if something happened and there was a medical emergency, the people that they would go to would be locals that had some knowledge with whatever that ailment was. Or they would have to try to see if that person could make it on the drive to the next biggest town. So my parents left they grew up very poor, and they left that in search of a better life to the United States. And it was a lot of just survival type of tendencies in terms of the way that they navigated life up until they became parents. And even after that, there was a lot of, there wasn't a whole lot of room to think about things other than let's make sure that the bills are paid. Let's make sure that we have rent. Let's make sure that we have food and all those things. So the reason I'm saying this is because we didn't really talk about the history of the family, except for the immediate family that we lived with, which was like our aunts and our uncles or my grandmother's. Not that we lived with all of them at the same time, but we did live with a good amount of different relatives at different times during the time that I was a child. And we never really got to ask a whole lot of questions. We just knew what I just told you. And as my sister and I became young adults, we were curious about, our heritage. And we didn't really, I didn't really make it a priority to find anything out right away because I kind of didn't want to. I despised a lot of what I was told growing up that was blamed on heritage or culture. So that would be machismo is the term used in Spanish, and it's basically toxic masculinity in a nutshell, for lack of better term. And so like I kind of like stayed away from wanting to know a lot of things, but now it's not that way, and I can go into even bigger detail on this later, but for the sake of not a super long video, me and my sister decided to do 23andMe. Actually, she decided, and she asked me if I wanted to do it, and this was years ago. I don't know how long ago. I don't know if it was like during the pandemic, pre-pandemic, or around like that time, because it was pretty recent that we did this. And we're like, yeah, let's find out, especially because I don't know if whoever's watching this understands this, because in the spaces where I am at in terms of like Instagram and regionally, and also the conversations that are had around my family, there is a lot of discussion about Native people, Indigenous people, and there is a larger movement now, I think, than there ever has been on the public sphere about decolonizing so many things, basically decolonizing everything. And, you know, like, it's painted the picture of these colonizers, these Europeans coming over to the Americas and, you know, brutally stealing, raping, trying to eradicate an entire peoples and treating them as less than actual human beings because they think they're superior. Once again, that is a discussion that can be expanded on later on. But anyway, so the European man is the colonizer, is seen as the bad guy. And so then comes this wanting to belong to more of the indigenous side of things because they're the good guys. And of course, this is giving you like a very basic, broad, black and white idea of the way that things are. So we're like, okay, so a Mexican, generally speaking, a Mexican can be said to be indigenous and European, but what percentages and how much European is in us and how much indigenous blood do we have? And I know now that that doesn't matter as much as we thought that it did. But it was a means to validate decolonizing and reclaiming certain indigenous practices. And it was almost like we were trying to fight the imposter syndrome that we were feeling for thinking that we could finally step into our indigenous skins, or call upon those ancestors, or call upon knowledge from those practices so that we could use them. And this is something that has always been a problem for me, is that imposter syndrome in different areas of my life, not even speaking on spirituality or practices, but just everywhere. There's always been the like, well, you know, this group of people says that I'm not really part of their group, and neither does this group of people, and being just stuck in the middle is a very common theme for a lot of Mexican people. I'm speaking on Mexicans, even though I know it applies to many other groups, many other first generation people, second, third generation children of immigrants, and so on and so forth. But that's my experience, so that's what I feel that I can actually speak on. So there is a lot of imposter syndrome because a lot of the times you're told that you don't belong in the spaces that you wish that you would be accepted into. But yeah, so back to the 23andMe. So we got that done, and I actually have it pulled up on my laptop so I can read it. And it's just something I want to like say out loud. and also because it's a kind of like a reflection of the way that I was raised. So so my results are, and I'm not going to say all the like little tiny percentages, just the bigger percentages. So I am 50% European, or 50.3, and I am 40% Indigenous American, 5.2% Sub-Saharan African, 2.4% Western Asian and North African, and then there's like almost a 2% that's unassigned, whatever that means. And so looking into like the European, because that means that I'm roughly almost half and half. I'm like a 50-40 split between being European and being Indigenous American. And the European part is mainly Southern European, which means it's the biggest chunk comes from Spain and Portugal, and then a little itty bitty bit from Italy. And this makes sense because the Spanish colonized the indigenous peoples of the area that is now known as Mexico. So that tracks. But it really showed the religious influences that I was raised around. So we were not raised under any type of like indigenous belief systems or purely indigenous belief systems. It was Catholicism. And then later, maybe like into my late teens, it was a different form of Christianity. And it was just very symbolic to having this group of people come into your land, try to erase your belief system, your religion, or your spirituality, and force theirs upon you. And that was kind of the way that I was feeling growing up. I felt like I was being forced to practice something, do something, believe in something that I wasn't even sure that I wanted to subscribe to. So that's why there's that like little parallel there. And I have so many more thoughts about this. But I kind of wanted to touch the other like points on the definition of heritage. So inherited traditions, I feel that everything was through that Catholic lens. All of the inherited traditions, or the traditions that I saw my parents partake in, were due to that Catholic influence. And it made me not want to be a part of them, because I wanted to find things out on my own. I didn't want somebody to be shoving something down my throat. Like, I wanted to decide for myself if that was something that I wanted. But when it comes to monuments and objects, this is where it gets really blurry, because even the Catholicism that is followed in Mexico by Mexicans is not, and it's never going to be, a one-size-fits-all. And a lot of it does incorporate influences of what could be considered I wouldn't say pagan, and I don't know if I want to say witchcraft, but I don't know what other word to use. So there is a blending, or maybe I could say indigenous, like indigenous influences on the Catholicism that is practiced by strictly Catholics, or strictly Catholic Mexicans. And one of them can be talked about in terms of the Virgin Mary, or what the Mexicans refer to as La Virgen de Guadalupe, which is not the Virgin Mary, but a blending of the Virgin Mary and if I'm not mistaken, I want to say Aztec, not Mayan, goddess. So they basically made a deity that was like their savior by blending these two together. And there is something so sad but so beautiful about knowing that. And for the longest time, I was confused and I didn't understand. And I'm still not an expert on this by any means, because I don't incorporate, or at least I'm not purposefully trying to incorporate Catholic influences into my practice currently. But I'm still learning a lot about this history, this heritage that wasn't really explained to me and wasn't really given to me, except for in like this kind of filtered, watered down version, because my parents' interest wasn't in connecting or learning about their past. It was about trying to survive in a new country and find a better life for their children. So now their children are struggling to find a way to practice that best represents them, that best explains who they are becoming, who they want to become, but also paying some respect still to where we came from. And it can get very complicated really fast, but I think I'm at a place right now where I am no longer scared to speak on it. I do not feel like I am an imposter. I feel like I definitely have the right to have these thoughts and opinions and feelings about these people that I am a part of. But I think I am going to stop talking about this here, because I have something that I definitely want to bring up when it comes to the cultural influences aspect of things. And I think that's when I'm going to get into cultural appropriation, because I have an opinion about that is maybe, I think, I don't even want to say it's a unique perspective. I mean, it is, but it's not like, oh my God, this like crazy out of this world idea that's going to blow you out of the water. But I'm actually going to talk about it. And I know that a lot of people don't like to talk about it or shy away from it. And I'm not doing that. So I think it's going to be an interesting talk, and probably speak more on how I feel about tackling cultural influences in general. So yeah, that's going to be an interesting video, but I don't even know how many more prompts that is from this one, but it's probably going to fall sometime in this week for sure. So yeah, I hope that you guys were able to follow me through my mind map discussion. I feel like every single time I'm talking about these things, I end up into like this little mind map of all these little points, and when I edit, it doesn't sound as chaotic as it first did when it was coming out of my mouth. But the last thing I want to do is sound like I'm just like confusing as hell. But yeah, until next time, tomorrow,